Hey everyone! So today I'm going to be having a joint Q&A with Damon, who you all know, and the runner of Socioville on the Discord, Fuzzy, who is an SLI, and
How's it
Damon is an
going?
SLE. So yeah, we got a few questions. Let's see if we can take a look at some of these questions to begin with. A guy called Wisson is saying, "What type is Logan Paul?" What do you guys think?
SE Dom.
I don't even know who he is, so I couldn't tell you.
He is this YouTube. He's a YouTuber. He's started doing sort of quite wacky entertainment videos. More recently, he started boxing people, and he once got into trouble because he took his cameras in a group to these woods in Japan where people are known to commit suicide, and they happened upon a guy hanging from a tree, and he just continued filming and sort of just laughing in shock at what was going on, and people found it very tasteless. So yeah, my impression is probably SLE. I think that the overall vibe of his videos is quite beta. It's very rough
Yeah.
humor.
I can't contribute to that per se.
Yeah, but yeah, I think he's an SLE.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that.
Yeah. Anyway, what I would ask people who are watching is just go ahead with asking any questions you want, and we will try to answer them as best as we can.
Perfect. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for questions, I think one of the things that I'd like to bring up, and I think it's a conversation, before I get started though, as far as Fuzzy's concerned, do you actually in your Discord server work on typing people, or you just discuss type? What do you do on the server?
We do both, man. It's kind of just I created the server like 3 days ago. We've got a decent amount of people in it, but we really just kind of discuss the theory, kind of hang out, and if someone needs to be typed, by all means, we got people in there. I'm not the best because I'm kind of new to Socionics. But yeah, I mean, it's really just a nice place to kind of talk to people about similar interests.
Did you say you were new to Socionics?
Huh?
You say you were quite new to Socionics?
Yeah, I am, because I was kind of in the MBTI community for like 4 years.
Yeah.
And I'm an ESTP in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of switched over. I was like, oh, this looks kind of interesting. And, just been learning ever since, and got typed as SLI by like multiple people. So I was like, I read about it and I was like, yeah, I don't really relate to Socionics SE at all. Because, it's more about pressure and stuff like that. I relate to SI as in like, sensing the world around you and comfort level, aesthetics, stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of like it better. So I'm kind of crossing over.
Well, that's actually very interesting, because Damon here...
One of the things I wanted to bring up specifically was that the reason why I asked that is because earlier, even when Jack had mentioned typing like Logan Paul, the interesting word he used was themes. The themes that are present. When most people type people, what I've seen is there's a lot of different methods, right? A lot of people use VI, which I think is unreliable. A lot of people use just output, like behavior. They observe behavior, but they don't really address these underlying themes. They don't address underlying motivations. And I think this is a big thing that's missing in the typology community in general. But specifically when you're using a model as complex as Socionics, you're looking for the metabolism of certain information, which may result in different outputs. And so I think that Jack had posted a video a while back about various typing methodologies and why they may be debunked pretty easily. So Jack, I'd like you to contribute a little bit about the common ones and see what you've seen in your experience and why you think some of those are, say, not effective. Like just observing behavior right on the surface may not be the most reliable tool for typing.
Well, you've got, as you say, very different methodologies. Now, one of the most well-known ones would be C.S. Joseph's approach of going by keywords, whereby the underlying motivations for those keywords are not explored. It can be very superficial in those terms. You can have people using visual identification just by going by facial structure, which is quite common actually in some Eastern European socionics communities, which I have been quite critical of. You can also find, just by going by type in terms of certain stereotypes, rather than trying to understand why they're doing the thing that they're doing. And that can also be a pitfall, because people can end up in careers which may seem odd to a particular sort of type, but they may be bringing something quite unique to it, which is more relevant to the type underneath. Thank you for the comment on the outfit. Well, I thought I'd get my remembrance poppy. I thought I'd turn it into a boutonniere, so I've tried that. I'm just trying a more stylish way of living nowadays, without embarrassing my fiancée too much.
Jack, we got a technical audio problem. I don't know if it's an echo, but it sounds like it might be coming from Fuzzy's end. So we might need him to mute if he's not speaking.
All right, yeah, I can do that.
Thanks, Fuzzy.
Yep. So sometimes what you were explaining would cut out, and I think because of the audio got taken over. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that I've seen consistently. Like, I've been in multiple Discord servers and people are like, what type is this? And this is how they act. And I think that's a good clue. And I think we can operate under like a hypothesis and use, okay, if this is the case. But one of the methodologies that I prefer to use, which I think most of your diagnostic team uses, is making sure that what we're seeing and the themes are present have to fit in at least an 8-function model. And so I think that's the most consistent, most reliable way, but a lot of that alludes to underlying motivations of why somebody does what they do. For example, you might see an SEE and an SLE both compete for power, and you can't say, oh, it's just an SLE because they're power hungry. There's more to it.
Yeah.
And so and then even in LIE, you might see them compete for power, but the motivation is entirely differently because they're looking for independence and not being controlled, versus more of establishing a power structure. So I think one of the things in typology, what we're looking for is these motivations of why people act the way they act. And I think that's one of the things that draw us to it in the first place, but people tend to forget that because they want a quick, easy assessment. And I don't know if that comes from the need to label versus the need to understand. But I find one of the most fascinating aspects is ITR, the intertype relations in socionics, because that really helps improve the communication and make things more seamless.
Well, I do think that there's something to be said about the idea of building the model for the person. Let's say you have like an empty skeletal structure. You've got to put all the different sorts of things on each of the different branches of that structure before you can be confident you've got the right typing. Because yes, you've seen something in someone's behaviour, and that may be, okay, a sign or a bit of contributing data to suggest they are one type over another. But it's when you can see all the different data points working together in a consistent way, which a particular model, a particular type can best explain, that's when you have a far more confident level of typing. I think that's far better than happening to see a couple of interviews and just recording instances of particular keywords. You know, that's failing to see the qualitative through the quantitative. I think that's a flaw we can all fall into. And as for intertype relations, it's a very useful data point. If you can work out people of certain types and you can see how they're interacting with other people, that can help you work out their types. Of course, there's also a trap there. If you've mistyped those people, that can mean that you lead to a butterfly effect on mistyping other people.
Exactly. I think I have a real problem personally with archetyping. It's because you might be exposed to a certain type of person and you think this person is a particular TIM and you're like, okay, this person is this type, and then you're like, they interact this way, and then you start typing other people based on that archetype. This person doesn't behave in this particular way, therefore they're not that type. And then subsequently, all your consecutive typings tend to fall apart. You're not using a logical model and making sure that the output fits the particular function model and supporting it with those alternative data points.
Right, it's the lack of consistency.
Yep, and I'm really, really stern about having that logical consistency when one presents an argument.
You've got to have consistent rules, but you've also got to have a breadth of scope. And that breadth of scope is something which you can only really acquire over time. Because each time you meet a new version of an SLE, you're going to have a new idea of how that type can manifest in a real person. It's the platonic form manifesting in many particular instances. So you need to have that particular form overturned again and again and again and again until you have a broad enough scope of examples. But each time you've got the logical argument to say, yes, they are this type rather than just another type. It's when people don't put in that logical reasoning and say, oh, they can't be this type because they haven't got the right coloured hair, or they haven't got that particular arrogant way of describing something in a certain way. I've seen someone say that just on my group the other day, that someone said, oh, John Ronson can't be an IEE because he hasn't got that intellectual arrogance which IEEs have. He must be another type, maybe an IEI. And I think, okay, one, how does it make sense? Two, why does anyone of every type, so everyone of one type, have to have its intellectual arrogance? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I think it's a step by step, and like you said, you're expanding the breadth of that archetype. The more that you're exposed to people who are consistent in that type, and that archetype tends to expand. The problem is most people don't want to expand the archetype. Instead, they want to expand the categories that they throw people into, and then they say, okay, they have to fit this archetype. And this is where people throw their hands up at a certain point, because you may have a particular person who isn't fitting any of those archetypes. And then you start hitting this whole point of, well, it's kind of hard to type, so I'll just throw them in a category. And that makes you question the reliability of the person executing the type. I think
you can't let one person of a single type change your view of the entire type. And I think that's what happens a lot.
Oh, we got a good question from Carla. Do you really think intertype relations have usage in real life? I mean, the thing is, even two people of the same type can hate each other. That is very true. And as we all know, even duels can hate each other. It was, after all, Stalin who had an ice pick put into Trotsky's head. So, yes, it's true, there are flaws with intertype relations. There are far more other factors at play in how well people get on with one another. What I mean to say by intertype relations is that, what is the information being communicated? And are they having a reaction to the kind or species of information? Or if it's something which is not expected according to intertype relations, maybe it's a reaction to the specifics of a context which may drive a particular conflict. So yeah, one should certainly take intertype relations with a degree of a pinch of salt in terms of their applicability across all contexts. And also there's the fact that intertype relations doesn't have a huge amount of scientific data behind it. There haven't been experiments to demonstrate that this sort of thing is likely to work. Instead, it's a question of, what is the information being shown by that person, and are they responding to that kind of information in a positive or negative way? And that can help you type someone.
Right. It's not meant to determine how one feels towards someone else. It's meant to determine the reaction to that specific type of information. And so it's only a clue in, and it should be used as a testing variable and not necessarily a way to determine someone's type. To me, the only effective way to do it is to make sure that you're building data points around Model A. And you're looking at how that information is metabolized across all 8 functions versus going, well, this person has this relationship with this person, so they have to be this type. That is a very flawed model. Like you said, it creates a butterfly effect. And so, yes, two types can hate each other, but it's the reaction and the dynamic that we're looking at, and not necessarily how they feel toward one another.
Yeah. And, got another question from Wisson. Well, more of an observation. Wisson says, people tried to type me at work, but at home I seem from the outside like a different type. The persona idea from Jung is interesting. And I think, yes, certainly. There's also a degree of limitation there. I would say that we should consider type and then how it appears in the real world as different shells. The underlying motivations is within, and then on the outside there are behaviours we actually happen to use in our real life surroundings, which are influenced by social pressure, certain expectations from others. So, as well as the type, there's also how that type may come across and actually appear in different situations. Let's say you're at work, and there's going to be more pressures. You're going to have a boss, most likely. He's going to place some expectations on you. So you may have to adapt your behaviours within certain limits. Now, of course, those limits will be down to what functions you can engage in to put on a said role. The role function itself is a very good example of this. But also you may use more of your demonstrators, even though you may not like to use your demonstrative. You may, if you're very confident, trying to put on more of your mobilizing. So these things may cause, say, an ILE to look more like an LSE. It could cause them to look more like, an SLE even, if they need to, for short periods of time. But where they can't adapt so well is when they're required to put in their vulnerable function. That's when you'll quickly see that they aren't actually that type. So this is again why it's good to see the underlying motivations behind this, and the more you understand about a person and the context in which they occupy, the better you're going to be at typing them.
Exactly. I think that's one of the core concepts that I've been trying to get across for a while, and I find that the methods that people are choosing to use can often be, I challenge them in quite a bit because they use, like I said, this archetypal model where they use intertype relations as the sole method of doing so instead of really using a logical method. And then when someone makes a claim, I feel they're stuck with the burden of proof and they need to be able to put forth an logical argument, and they have trouble doing so.
Exactly. I mean, I've once seen someone say that Superman must be an SEI. And their reasoning was that they're pretty sure that Lex Luthor was an LIE. And because Superman was because Lex Luthor was the arch nemesis of Superman, they must be conflictors. Therefore, Superman must be an SEI. So that's probably a good example of where taking intertype relations so literally can lead to problems.
Right. I was going through some literature the other day written by a few people who are pretty heavy into socionics, and that's often what I'm seeing is they're using a lot of either intertype relations or very generalized understanding, and I would say simplified understanding of how information elements present themselves, but what they don't realize is as that information element is put into a particular function, it's metabolized differently, and the output can be expected differently based on where it is in the model. And that's why I'm a big fan of using blocking to look at the type methodology too, is because you can see how the output of that particular thing would be very different. So you can't say TI is just this and it's this across the board. You're going to see TI operate in different methodologies and come out in different behaviors based on where it falls in the model.
Well, that's also lends itself to the analogy I've liked to use recently. This idea that information elements are like highly reactive atoms. Yes. And that as soon as you take them from the realm of our imagination and put them in the real world in some way, their high levels of reactivity force them to bond with another element to create a molecule of information. So rather than ever say that there is pure, rarefied, introverted logic in the world, no. Introverted logic can only ever appear to us either with a partnership or a bonding with extroverted sensation or with extroverted intuition. It can appear as either these abstruse theories, abstract ways of understanding the world across different contexts, or it's the enforced rule, the enforcement of an idea onto its surroundings to make some sort of difference or change with certainty. Those are two very different things.
Yeah, we got another question. And the question is, would you recommend to use socionics to improve education? Is it even possible? If so, how would you do it?
Well, I've had an idea for this. I thought that if you take different classes, if you divide, say, a whole year group at school into different classes, which I think most large schools do, you could divide them based on their quadra values. So you have 4 classes. And then what you could do is you can assign them to a form group teacher whose quadra matches their own. Maybe that could lead to positive effects. Alternatively, it could lead to a lack of diversity in a certain group, a lack of awareness of other ways of thinking, which actually prepares them worse for life. I'm not so sure. That's the sort of thing which needs to be tested. But yeah, I think that the idea of actually having shared values in terms of how you manage information could potentially be very valuable for education, simply by having the information presented in a form, a structure, a certain way in which you're best accustomed to absorbing said information. Now,
that's very been under a lot of testing lately, not in the terms of socionomics, but in general. We're looking at like NLP modalities, for example. You're looking at visual, auditory, kinesthetic. People are changing learning systems now based on how people receive information, and they're sticking with at least for now. You're looking at these are visual learners, these are auditory learners, these are kinesthetic learners. But then when you move into the whole thing of aside from that, if you look at shared values and how people receive information that way and metabolize information, it definitely could improve education. But then there's the counter effect of sometimes resistance and conflict is so important for growth. You need to be put in a position where you're uncomfortable, and you need to be. I like the idea of warring against something to improve your own personal power, right? And so you need to push against something to grow. You need to have that conflict, and sometimes not understanding something or getting slapped in the face with something you don't understand makes you feel good. Like, I need that.
Yeah. As long as it doesn't break you, it could make you stronger.
Right. Even if it does break you, there's nothing better than a broken person standing back up and doing it again.
Assuming they have the strength of will to do so.
Yes, assuming that, right.
Yeah, I think that, for instance, I can think of so many examples of SEIs, say, or IEIs, going to school and being presented with a very piecemeal delivery of information, drips and drabs of factual data being thrown at them, and they have no idea how to make sense of it, no idea how to order it and structure it in their heads. They don't know what to do with it, and it's all slipping through their fingers. It's too much. They get overloaded. So how do you prevent a situation like that? Or vice versa. You take an IEE or an SEE in school, and they're being given a very strict and clear outcome or structure with which to understand everything around them. And naturally, they want to see all the data. They don't want to see just the structure. They find it too simplistic. They'll start trying to challenge it, and they'll have difficulty seeing things in these linear terms. You need to swap around the teachers, I think, to have a right style of logical information presented to the right types. I just want to add a bit to what Carl is saying. Carl's saying, I don't mean in typing someone, I mean more what is its use value. She's talking about intertype relations. Well, yes, I don't think intertype relations is a guarantee that you're going to get on with someone. There could be all sorts of reasons why you would not, which are over and above just the type. Also, certain conceptions of duality are not going to be purely harmonious. It's a very alpha understanding of duality. If you take beta types, their idea of duality can be far more intense, far more conflict-oriented. And the idea is that even with all the struggle, that is something which is beneficial for them, assuming they are aligned in their outcomes and the things they want to see achieved in the world and the things which they want to see in terms of their own journey. So yeah, there's more to it than type, and also how intertype relations work are not all the same depending on the types actually taking place in these relationships. But I think there is a use value. I think that if you can get the idea that certain interactions between information are beneficial more so than others, and if you can then use that to then put together certain relationships, I think that could be a clear use, a clear benefit for different people in different relationships. And it may actually have more conflict than less conflict, but for types which actually like the conflict, that could be a good thing.
Yeah. So, Fuzzy, what do you have any input on so far? What we've thrown out there? Anything you think?
No, I think it's all completely understandable, and the stuff with the whole school system and different setups for different learning styles, kinesthetic, visual, auditory. Yeah, I mean, what you said, Damon, we're definitely going towards it. I'm right out of high school. I'm 18. I remember they made me take a test, and it was like I got kinesthetic, and I'm not sure how they're going to implement this new system, but it'll be interesting to see.
Right. So one of the things is they do this in the workplace a lot, right? Which is like, oh, here's this person's method of communicating, or VAC, for example, they use it there. That's been so widespread now. It's like, oh, you're a kinesthetic learner, which I thought I was just ADHD or something when I was in school, because I'm like, just let me do it. I don't want to sit here and talk about it. Let's just do it. Just shut up. I just want to do it. And that's how I always was. I had no desire to sit there and go through. I walked out of so many college lectures because it was like I was going crazy, just sitting still, sweating in my seat. Like, I can't sit here anymore. So I just walk out, and I'm like, this is just too much. So as soon as I got to do it, I was good. But sitting there back, and then there's actually some really interesting things, because I don't think I'm ADHD now. Understanding how I learn, metabolize information, understanding the things that work for me. It's like understanding that, okay, this is how you actually pick up information. So it'd be interesting to see these different case scenarios where you could push forth like, okay, somebody with the shared values, how does one receive this information versus how one doesn't, and then trying to push through it. For example, me pushing through a college lecture that's extremely boring, and that was really, really difficult for me all throughout college. So I think there's some use in it for sure. I just don't know how far it would go. I think another thing to consider when it comes to intertype relations is the hierarchical positions of those relations. For example, like Jack alluded to earlier, if you have a actual boss who is your supervisee, you're going to have a different dynamic than if you were in a relationship with somebody who was your supervisee. And I think that has to be considered too. There's other aspects that people have to consider in order to make a generalized statement. I've never been fond of generalizations for that reason. I like to make sure that there is some underlying absolute logical consistency underneath the surface that makes sense. If you generalize and you have these case by case, well, it's this and this, it makes it a little more difficult in that sense. I'm looking for, there has to be logical consistency, which is why I'm so fond of the structure of Model A and why I'm sort of resistant to see much editing to it. I'm all about the testing for it, pushing it forward, but I'm resistant to the edits that are being made. And so I have struggled with that a little bit because it's like, is it really tweaking with the underlying model that I actually have found very much use in? Looking at ITR, for example, I can look at a scenario where I say this hierarchical relation has an impact on this dynamic, regardless whether this person is a supervisor or supervisee relationship. Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean, there is certainly something to be said that how these intertype relations will surface in terms of different hierarchical relationships, it needs to be looked at and viewed and tested. And indeed, as you say, with a boss and someone who's an employee, there's going to be an underlying asymmetry there. It could even be that duality might not even be the right sort of relationship for that particular dynamic.
Right.
It's different to two people who are quite equal in terms, living in a very sort of close, intimate fashion. And it can also be that far more formal relationships, where there's less room for the personalities to come across, may actually be more tolerable for typically less compatible intertype relations. If you're going to have some sort of friendship with a conflictor, for instance, it's when it's most formal and most removed. Actually, I just want to go back to this idea of learning styles, about visual, auditory, kinesthetic. I remember being told in I think it was like my first day in a psychology class, when I started my MED, they said this is one of the big myths. There isn't actually much evidence to support the idea that there are these three distinct learning styles. So that might throw a spanner in the works a little bit. But I think there may be some underlying truth to it. I think if you look at it in terms of clubs, well, he's looking at, say, myself versus my fiancée. My fiancée learns very much through talking things out with other people, a social learning style. Whereas I sort of absorb things just by reading it through to myself and thinking about it. Which I think would make sense if you see myself as being a more intuitive, logical type and her as being more of a sensory, ethical type. So maybe there's something to be said about learning styles in terms of clubs, which may be worth investigating and testing. But I think there's a whole, at least the visual versus auditory side, I'm not sure those are meant to be distinct learning styles. I can see something in kinesthetic for, say, a sensory person versus an intuitive person. But I think there are probably more dimensions to test, and also more nuances between the different dimensions to test.
I think so. I agree. I mean, when you really dive deeper into NLP, you'll find that there's actually 16 different learning styles.
Okay.
It breaks it down into 16, which is uncanny and in a sense kind of funny because there's 16 types as well, but these types have nothing to do with like Socionics. It's just there's 16 of them. It breaks down from visual, breaks down into 2, then 4, and it's the same thing with auditory, kinesthetic. They break down, and it winds up being about 16 different ways of learning. Auditory has an additional 2, whereas the rest of them have a certain fixed number too, and I'd have to list them out to know the exact numbers of each. But auditory has the most.
Oh, okay. So they're not just symmetrical splits; they are asymmetric splits. Okay, now that's interesting. If it were just symmetrical, I'd say, well, likelihood is base 2, 16 is quite an easy number to reach. But if it's asymmetric, that is more chance. At least, then may not necessarily be chance. It may be just it's actually lower probability, and there could be something there which causes it to happen.
Right. And that's what I found interesting was just the numbers kind of align there too, and you're like, whoa, it's actually pretty similar. You can see how people are still how they process that particular learning style. So I think it's really fascinating, and I want to see how it pans out in the near future, because I know that I'm so restless when it comes to being stuck in a room where I have to sit still for a long period of time. Like even on videos, I start getting really what's the word, fidgety, because I can't sit here for a long period of time. I start like doing things that I'm like getting fidgety. So I struggled with this because it creates the energy that I need, but I also have to sit here for a long period of time, and I'm like, okay, I gotta do something. So then I exercise this restraint, like, okay, finish the video. But I've always been so kinesthetic, and I mean, there's a little aspect of it visual there, but it's primarily kinesthetic. Let me do it. And that's how I was with typology too. I still needed to test it out. I needed to attempt to do it. I did a lot of free work for a while to make sure that, you know, things were lining up logically and people agreed with what I was coming up with. So what you got to say?
I completely relate there, because in school I can't sit in a lecture and listen. It's like just going in one ear and out the other. But it's like, for me, it's like, just give me something and I'll do it. Like my interests have always been, you know, working on guitars, working on computers, working on cars, stuff I can actually physically see what I'm doing and learn from it. Because I feel like I can't learn unless I'm actually doing the process myself.
Yeah, that's how I learned how to build cars too. I just started working on one. I'm like, here's a transmission. Okay, let's just take it apart. And everyone's like, oh my God, that's like a big I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to see what happens.
It's like people these days, they don't take the time to figure out how to do something with themselves. They're like helpless. They're like, I'm going to call IT support. And like what's happening with my computer? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I teach my sales training class, and there's a computer component. And I'm like, look, I'm going to give you guys a forewarning. I have zero patience teaching IT. Like, I have no patience for it whatsoever. I was like, I'm good at it, but I want nothing to do with it. I was like, I created like a 5-tier hierarchy where you reach me last, but you go through all these other avenues first before you ask me the IT question. Because by the time if you ask me first, I'm going to get severely annoyed.
Yeah.
So,
people don't understand
critical thinking to figure out your problem.
Use this device you have in your head.
Yeah, it's like, use some critical thinking, figure it out, you'll get around to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can teach most things, but IT, I don't know. Somehow it gets under my skin. I don't know why. It's like,
nah, I get it, man.
I think it's the lack of patience that I have, because, you know, they when somebody's new to a computer, this is a side topic, but somebody's new to a computer, they're moving the mouse around real slow, and I'm just like, dude, hurry up. Like, it's right there, move. It drives me nuts. I think that's why it's like, and I just want to take over. I'm just like, let me do it, but then I'm like, if I do that, they're never going to learn how to do it. So I sit there and watch. I'm starting to sweat, and I'm like, let's just hurry up. Come on, let's go. That's why I created this system where it's like a hierarchy where you have to move through it before you can even ask me the IT question.
I mean, maybe it's something to do with the fact that all the activity is limited to, well, half a meter a quarter of a meter of screen, and everything is done on this little space. That's the only thing you can interact with to show anything to anyone. And only one person can use that at any particular time. I can see that being incredibly frustrating to someone who's extrovert sensation oriented. You have all the space in this room, and you're focusing entirely on just those few centimeters in front of you to go and interact with a mouse and a screen.
That might actually explain it. Like, I've never thought about it like that, but that actually might explain it. It feels like nothing is being done. And it's the odd thing, because I'm actually a really patient teacher when it comes to other things. I can repeat a process, that's fine, but IT just drives me insane. And that might be a valid point. Maybe that's my impatience with it. I don't know. I think I need to analyze myself and what's actually going on in my head when I get those moments again.
Let's see, what's Wisson saying? Autonomy in learning, not being handed what to learn, ability to jump and research, interest oneself, remove social pressure. Teacher can give resources and encourages. Yeah, can't disagree with that. So, let's see. Maybe what we could do is, if someone on here offers another celebrity or something else for us to type, maybe we can try typing that, and that could be quite fun. Do you guys think it's a good idea? Yeah.
It might be a good idea. One of the challenges is it has to be a celebrity we all know to contribute.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, like, I had no idea who Logan Paul was, so that didn't work out really well in my favor. But if it's somebody that we all know and we understand some of their motivations, then it might be more of a fun cycle to toss around.
Yeah. So go on, guys. Whoever's listening, give us some suggestions.
We can always go back and revisit the Donald Trump typing.
We could. Oh my God! That is so over. Oh, that is a very well trodden path at this time.
It's always one that's still in debate to this day.
Oh my goodness! There was someone just before on my YouTube channel saying that he's an ESFJ, and that's just. Oh, Winston says C.S. Joseph. We have just benchmarked C.S. Joseph.
Yeah.
And I have actually discussed the matter with Eric since, and he thinks we might not actually be wrong. He may indeed be an EIE, as we have benchmarked him to be. So
really,
EIE we think. Now a lot of people, some people thought LIE for him, and
I would think LIE, but that's interesting.
Now one of the reasons why we thought, I used to think maybe LIE. But we looked at a video of his where he was presenting on this very complicated theory he'd come up with to explain basically everything. And it was very lacking in introverted logic, but it was clearly an attempt at introverted logic. And it became quite emotive and grandiose. It didn't have any sign of valued extroverted logic. There's no real fact collection in it. It was more exploring different possibilities and influences and trying in a very clumsy way to draw them together into some sort of theory. So that was quite eye-opening, and it seems to me that beta values does make quite a great deal of sense. If you look at his Discord server, how things are managed, how he has a series of devotees who basically protect anything he says and are against questioning what he says, it seems to fit a lot more. Now, how could an EIE look like an LIE? It's quite possible. They can just come across as being more serious, come across as being more process-oriented, and really it's about him defending the process which he's put together, but he sticks that process quite solidly. There's no sign of him trying to continuously adapt it and take in new data to shape or change it. So yeah, I think it's quite possible for an EIE to look like an LIE if they want to come across as more intellectually authoritative. But it's a lot harder for an LIE to appear like an EIE. After all, why would they want to? Right. So yeah. Now
we have a sarcastic claim, I believe. Trump is an ENTJ. And there's also this question. I've always felt ignoring and vulnerable functions are related somehow. So thoughts.
Yes.
And you want to take that, Jack?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You've got in Model A, you've got essentially four sets of function twins, one could say. And I say they're twins in that they share a lot of qualities because of their function dichotomies. So when it comes to ignoring and vulnerable, I would say these are certainly function twins. And they're twins because they're both cautious, they are both subdued, they're not valued, and they are both inert. They're quite firm in their positions. They don't change based on external input. So this means these are the two areas which are the nah functions, not dealing with that. The only difference is that the ignoring is stronger than the vulnerable and is a bit more situational. So when the leading function wants it to, the ignoring function can switch and say, okay, I'll do that as little as possible, and then I'll go back to not doing it anymore. Whereas the vulnerable function is computer says no permanently.
Yeah, and doesn't really even metabolize that type of information very well at all.
No. It's like it doesn't exist for it. It's like a blind spot. It just won't react to the need or pressure to do something. The ignoring function is like that most of the time, except when the leading function says, hey, I actually need this sort of information right now, can you step in and do something? And the ignoring function will switch on, deal with it very effectively, and then switch back off again.
I think a really good rudimentary example would be like if we look at SI ignoring versus SI polar, for example, and the awareness of one's situational health at any given point, if they were both performing in some type of athletics, what you might see is someone who has SI ignoring would go, I think I sprained my ankle, it might be time to lay off of it. Whereas someone with SI polar might not even be aware that that type of damage actually happened and still push through it. So on the surface, you would see two people pushing through it, but one is not really receiving that information well and completely goes, nope, that doesn't exist, or barely metabolized, something might be wrong, but I'm not sure. Whereas SI ignoring might be like, there is an actual issue, I might have to back off for a second. I don't want to. Or they'll go, you know what, it's not worth it, weigh out the options and still push through it. But that all happens internally. You don't really see it on the surface. That's why you have to dig deeper.
And that's the thing, like an SLE, take Teddy Roosevelt, he got shot while giving a speech. And I think he said something like, it's just a flesh wound, and he sort of continued giving his speech. Now, it didn't kill him, he survived, right? Because he made an assessment, yes, I've been quite badly injured here, but I want to do the speech and push through, and I'll survive and make good with it, just go to the hospital later. That's what he did. So that is a judgment call by someone who does not value introverted sensation, but has a sense of it and knows where their limits are.
Exactly. Yep, that's a good historical example of what I was just describing.
What is Kat Passionate saying? Now, Kat, she does a blog
LIE
and a server.
Not want to look like an EIE.
Ah, I see. Well, because there's lots of extroverted ethics there, and an LIE would try to give factually accurate data. And the more you use extroverted ethics, the more that you tend to lead to communicating your emotions of a situation, the less you're conveying the factual matter-of-factness of the situation. So an LIE is going to think that's probably not the best way to communicate. And whereas you take it, you flip around on it, you do 180 on it, an EIE may think, I can actually win more people over, I can make more of an impression on people if I give the impression that I am very factually knowledgeable. So I'm going to try a drier, more matter-of-fact communication. So it's more often that extroverted ethics can see value in extroverted logic than the other way around. That's not to say that an EIE can't also see the value of extroverted ethics, and they may try and make their talks more entertaining, just to win more people over, so more people can listen, so they can then give some helpful information. So it does work both ways. But I think a sustained approach of looking like an LIE is more likely to happen for an EIE than an LIE putting in a sustained approach of looking like an EIE. They certainly wouldn't push outside the boundaries of extroverted ethics. They wouldn't go beyond normal levels of expression, whereas an EIE would.
I think this ties back to kind of some of the terms that were coined, I think by you, might have been somebody else, but integrity seeking versus clarity seeking too. You have someone who values TE. The last thing they want to do is embellish it with any type of emotive to make sure that the truth remains consistent versus any kind of distortion of that idea of truth that they have. And I think if you add emotion, it may take away from what they see as factual and true.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, we're pretty sure it was rhetorical, Cat, but we need questions to answer. So we're going to answer anything, even the rhetorical. Frank James. Who knows who Frank James is?
I don't know who Frank James is.
I
think he's... Actually, you know what? I think he's that YouTuber, that INFJ YouTuber. Is that his name?
I do not know Frank James.
I don't know him very well either. I think that is who that is, though. He has quite a large subscriber base, I believe.
He's that makeup guy, right?
I don't know. I don't think he does makeup. Maybe he does makeup.
I do not know this Frank James fellow. Okay, Frank James was a Confederate soldier, guerrilla, and outlaw. He was the older brother of outlaw Jesse James and was also part of a James Younger gang. I think this is the wrong Frank James.
I think it's this Frank James who has 125,000 subscribers and he does typology videos.
Okay, let me look up this Frank
the
James.
INF. Okay, I know who
Yeah,
you're
the
talking about.
INFJ
Yeah.
Frank James.
Okay.
Okay, let me look this guy up.
I mean, no, the other one would be really random, but it's
Yeah.
so funny.
Oh,
got
this
lots
one.
of different Frank James in here, people.
Typology, comedy sketches, self-development. Oh, self-development, that's a clue, perhaps. Personality tests and whatever else piques our interest. Ah, are you a hive mind?
Someone's not.
Let's take a look. 16 personalities as mums.
Let's see, I'm going to take a look myself.
Yeah.
All right.
I believe C.S. Joseph typed him as INFP
Ah.
and MBTI.
So we will have to first assess the value of C.S. Joseph typings. Nah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Motivational videos. Do aliens exist? Now the thing is, they're going to be again, we're talking about shells in the type, how the type, what it's motivated by, and then social pressures and other manifestations. So he's going to want to look eye-catching because that's how you get people to follow you and subscribe. There is talk about self-development there. Quite confessional style, repressed anger being one of his videos. Saying yes too much, when you dread everything, anticipatory anxiety. Quite confessional here. I'm assuming he's talking about things the dream I gave up on. Yeah, no, so there is some confessional here, some vulnerability. Song made me cry today. The question is, would it be more IEI? Could be EII. I know Kevin Chan says on there EII. I have to actually see a video, but I'm thinking, is it worth everyone watching me watch a video of someone else which they can't see? Maybe I can do a share screen.
I think you can. It might be laggy,
I think I can do that.
Considering that we're pushing through a couple streaming services.
Yeah. Let me see if I can try it. Let's see. Let's do the truth about being an empath. Okay, this sounds interesting. So that's yeah. So let me try this. Let me just do share screen, see if that works. Oh, I can do share screen. Okay. Right, hang on a second. Let me see if I can.
Been a weird hair day, man. Today we're talking about empaths. What is an empath? Is this even a real thing, or is this some spiritual mumbo jumbo?
So there's no
Is it
sound,
just a way for
but
people
you're
to
definitely
feel?
seeing your screen.
Oh, that's no good.
Yeah.
Okay, let's cut that out then, because that's not going to work unless you can actually have a sound as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I'll shop this. Okay, maybe not. But talking.
So looking at the neck beard, I would say he's probably EII.
Okay, here's a tagline. It says, if you can absorb other people's emotions, then you might be an empath. But that is not all there is to it. I don't know, that sort of... Even in that sense, I'm identifying as a certain, subgroup of people who have some sort of remarkable ability to absorb other people's emotions. Maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure about EII. There's a lot of presentation here.
Yeah, I don't know. We would have to, I think, dive a little deeper.
I think we'll have to.
Out.
I think we'll have to. I don't think we should answer this one here today. I think there's something which needs a bit more exploration before we can give a good typing. Especially as I had no idea who he was.
Here,
okay, let's take a look.
We got Charles Krauthammer, for example, was very interested in talking to random people after his TV talks and being very warm towards them. Why does this behavior show in someone with FE polar?
Okay, now Charles Krauthammer, I do think is an ILI. I haven't seen him being especially warm, but it depends on what the context is. Is he talking to someone who he knows, who he actually has a strong relationship with? Or is he putting on some sort of warm, emotive appeal towards people around him? Is he deliberately shaping the way he is coming across? Because I think those are two different things. A natural rapport he's built up with someone, and the emotions he's deciding to give off. So that's the question. Which is it with Charles Krauthammer? I do think he's an ILI. And I would assume, based on what I think his type to be, that it's probably the former and not the latter. But I could be wrong.
The other question is that looks like there was another one up here. Differences between SLE and ILETI. So.
Well, you got probably two very good examples of people to explain that difference, actually. I think that, in general, when I start talking about introverted logic, I tend to go off a bit more in tangents. I tend to describe lots of different ideas and situations. And I think that for Damon, I think you're a bit more direct. You're more about what is the point of what I'm saying, what am I trying to communicate, and what is the impact it's going to have.
Yep. I want to make sure what I'm saying has the right impact and it does what it needs to do.
I'd also say that for you, Damon, I think perhaps even more so than me, there's an idea that we have this theory, we want it to be certain, and we want to now make sure that it's established. For me, I think I do that as well, more than other alpha NTs. But I am still lending an eye towards things like what Kimani's working on with his Socionics tweaks, with Ibrahim's Model A2. I've got a high bar, but I'm still keeping that window open for new addendums to the theory which could actually improve it. I'd never feel quite comfortable closing that door.
Yeah, I'm a little more resistant to it. I like the structure as it is. I think that's where a big obvious difference is like, I'm a little more resistant. I'm not saying it's closed completely. I just need it to make logical sense. It needs to make complete 100 sense to me before I think I'm going to just accept that it's a nice rendition of any aspect of it. So there's that aspect. I think another example of it is that sensory reality, that TI is often going to look like structuring, a lot more physical structuring of resources, people. That's why I think a lot of the term for the SLE is often marshalling, is that we tend to want to structure everything.
Bring order to the chaos.
Reality, where you'll see the concept of other things being structured often by alpha NTs.
No, certainly. I think I do not bring very much order to said chaos around me. In fact, this notice board behind me was an attempt to bring order to chaos, but there's actually nothing on there that is up to date. I don't even think the map is up to date. At least I couldn't. We went to Malta, but I couldn't find Malta to be large enough there to actually scratch it off. So yeah, I think nothing on there is actually up to date. I think the wedding invitation on there. No, that is up to date. Yeah, that's because Zara put it up, not me. I had nothing to do with the invitation on there to the wedding. But yes, that is the only thing that's up to date, and it's not from my input. Even the driving instructor on there, I'm no longer with that driving instructor. So it's completely useless to me.
Yeah. So other than that, looks like somebody wants us to type the Joker from the newest movie.
I think we already did that one. I think there's some discussion on the group. I thought, after some discussion, I think IEI probably makes sense. But what do other people think?
I think IEI. Yep,
yeah.
That was my impression too.
How about you,
Fuzzy? I haven't worked through the steps to really be confident in that, but I certainly think IEI is what was my initial impression.
What do you think, Fuzzy?
I have not seen the new movie.
Oh, shock. Oh well, fair enough. And yeah, one of my reasons for IEI, for the Joker in the new movie, is that there's clearly far less extrovert sensation to him than the Joker we see in other media. But also, there's this underlying motivation that he has some sort of destiny to do with making people laugh. It's not that he is really infused about just being in the moment, making people laugh. He feels there's some sort of reason to be put on the earth to bring happiness and laughter to everyone. So that's interesting. There's also a clear emphasis on relationships for him, both in this fictional girlfriend and also in his relationship to his mother, and that his area of turning is when he actually destroys those relationships, because one of them is found to have never actually happened, and the other one, he actually kills his mother. He turns on her eventually, but there is clearly a loyalty there that is then turned on. So there's more introverted ethics than I think compared to other types. And yeah, his extroverted ethics, it's there. He has a certain romanticized way of viewing things, his purpose, and what he's meant to do, but he's not in the moment charming at all, and I think he's more spacey, if anything, and that sort of can creep people out a bit. So those are sort of my reasons. Also, no extroverted logic whatsoever. He's thoroughly impractical. I mean, who takes a gun into a into a children's hospital? That's it. Not a mental hospital, a children's hospital. No, you don't do that. There's no common sense. So I think I probably makes the most sense for him. Yes. What was some of the other questions here? Hyperspace says, WTF, Damon is Eli Evo. No, this is not true. Go on, Damon, blow his mind.
I've had that discussion too many times. My patience has worn thin with it.
Another well-trodden path. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Carla says, is there more realism for SLE? Yeah, I'd say so. What do you think?
What it said, realism? Yeah, absolutely. It's about moving things in reality. That's what it is.
I think actually there's a desire for absolute certainty with the beta STs, because they actually want to implement this. They want to feel they have the right to implement this on the world. They need the certainty to grant them that right to implement it. Yes. Doubt and hesitation, that's not going to fly if you're trying to implement something. It's the alphas who are far more happy to question things and look things around in different angles, because they're not so focused on actually bringing it to some implementation and committing to an outcome with it.
How much does deliberate self-presentation relate to FE? I'm not sure what this is hinting at. Do you have an idea what that might be hinting at?
Well, I think, I'm not sure, I just take it at face value. I'd say yes. If you're thinking about how you're coming across to others, the impression you're setting, I think that has a lot to do with extroverted ethics. It has something to do with extroverted sensation as well, I think, in terms of just the physical impact, how impressive you are with other people. But in terms of how people emotionally react to you, it's mostly, I'd say, 70%, I'd say, is extroverted ethics. And Pesse thinks it may have something to do with extroverted thinking, extroverted logic, since it involves the management of self-expression as a capacity which can be used for a certain goal. Well, look, but what is the data that you're evaluating? You're not evaluating facts. You're not evaluating any sort of mechanical outcome. You can't really quantify it. All you're evaluating is how are people reacting to it. What is the change in their emotional state towards you? And I think that's very much an extroverted ethics thing to assess. Osama Al-Ghamdi, who's on our group, says, why is Bobby Fischer benchmarked as an LSI? Well, I thought he almost certainly had to be some sort of beta. And he was so targeted towards a singular outcome, a goal, to be the very best chess player, and dedicated himself 100% to that goal. Now, I see how people say maybe an SLE, but I think for Bobby Fischer, there was a very careful, almost memorization of every single technique or tool in any sort of approach to chess. Complete dedication towards that. And in his actual playing style, he balanced out very effective tactics with also long-term strategy. He had a good mix of both. He wasn't so much an improviser, he could do both, and he was an expert at both aspects. So that's why I'd say maybe middling both extroverted sensation and introverted intuition, with a dominating focus on introverted logic, perhaps. And I don't see much sign of extroverted ethics. Like, he's not a particularly charismatic fellow. He was soon shunned after he actually was once he left chess playing because of his.
Wasn't he exiled too, or did I get the wrong guy?
I'm not sure he was exiled. I don't know, but he said some very I don't know, white supremacist sort of things, and he got rejected by most mainstream society as a result. But yes, his overwhelming fixation on a singular goal seems to me to be more LSI. There's some introverted intuition there. Whereas in SLE, it's more, yes, they want to be the top of what they do, they want to be the best, want to dominate, but I don't think it's so linearly focused over such a long period of time. I think they'll find other ways they can also expand their influence. What do you think, Damon?
So I'm not entirely familiar with that. So, but I was actually looking up Bobby Fischer and his exile. So
go on.
I was looking that up. I was saying if he actually was, because my dad was a huge chess player, so I wanted to see if that's the case.
Okay. Fuzzy, any opinions on Bobby Fischer? Or do you not have enough data?
I have no idea who this man is.
That is okay. He's a very, very good chess player. Perhaps the best ever chess player. Let's see, what else is there here? Harmony Corrine. I don't know who that is. Does anyone know who Harmony Corrine is?
No, I don't know who that is.
Nope. Sorry, Florian. You had to try one we all, at least some of us know. Cat Passion wants to say, can we talk about how DCNH is useless, logically inconsistent, and how people continually try to apply it to Model A when it's meant for Model G, and how people use it to justify bad typings? Sure, I could talk about that. I'm sure that Damon will talk about that with great zeal.
Jack, your audio is cutting out.
Oh, damn.
It's like phasing in and out. Is that true? Are you hearing the same thing, Fuzzy, or is it just me?
No, it's cutting out.
Okay. Can people hear me now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so we just want to talk about DCNH. Cat Passion was to say how it's useless, logically inconsistent, and how people continually try to apply it to Model A when it's meant for Model G, and how people use it to justify bad typings. And I imagine, Damon, that you could talk about that topic with great zeal and enthusiasm.
Yeah, so the Model G is, to me, it's fairly redundant. I think Jack was a lot more fair on it than I am. Again, Jack leaves that door more open than I do. There is a video that he released about his review and his conversation with Ben. I think that yields a lot of insight on what came out of that discussion. You also read the new book. I didn't actually buy it. So that's, again, part of me that's like, I don't know if I want to go down that road. But as far as DCNH, I don't think there is any logical consistency, kind of what we alluded to when we talked about intertype relations. Because when you get into a certain situation, you're likely to adapt to that situation. It's assuming that people are static, and people tend to adapt given on a situation. And when you look at intertype relations, it's kind of the same concept, right? If you have a supervisor or a boss that's actually your boss, you may respond to that person differently if they're a supervisor in a romantic relationship. And I think you'll find the same subtyping DCNH the same way. I've often related to the dominant side of that, and I have also related to some of the other sides of that, and I found that it just depends on the circumstance. Jack, I think you said the same thing not too long ago, too.
Yes, I think I certainly change in what sort of role I play within the group, depending on who else is in the group. But I think the problem with it is more underlying. The basis of DCNH are three subtype dichotomies. And if you look at their definitions, they seem to very much be rip-offs of extroverted, introverted, of rational, irrational, and of perhaps sort of like static, dynamic, or a bit more towards inert and contact, if you look at function dichotomies. Either way, I'm not sure that these are going to be useful if they'd in any way overlap or double up on existing dichotomies. I think that's a recipe for confusion and admixture with other types, straying over into the boundaries of these other types in the socio. I think if you're going to have a legitimate subtype system, you'll need to have dichotomies which have no easily conceivable overlap, that are clearly independent, but do not fit already naturally into Model A. I think that's the way you need to go about doing it. I think probably the most natural subtype system is probably just male or female. That leads to clear differences in behaviour, and it has nothing to do with Model A, what biological sex you are. So I think that's probably the best way of thinking about it in terms of a subtype system. But once you have these fuzzy dichotomies that partially overlap, you're going to lead to difficulties. And if you then use certain, behaviours related to certain subtypes which are like other types, say a normalizing subtype being quite meticulous and organised, and you ascribe that to an ILE, at what point does that ILE start to look a bit like an LII or even an LSI? And if you look at the descriptions in Galenko's book, he does use words like meticulous, which seem to, one, trample over the idea of an ILE being introverted sensation suggestive, and it does seem to create this confusion and admixture between type and subtype.
I think there's another interesting point brought up here. Ibrahim says calculated presentation would involve SE, and he said it's a bit Machiavellian, which brought up the conversation of Robert Greene that C.S. Joseph typed him as an angelic INFP. And that to me seems incredibly odd that someone who would write about the acquisition of power would be someone who is SE vulnerable.
Yes. So are we talking about Machiavelli? Or did I miss something there?
No, I moved into, so there's two things here. The first one is calculated presentation would involve SE. That's Ibrahim's claim that it's a bit Machiavellian.
Yes.
And so I think that makes sense, right? You're trying to present in a certain way to have influence.
Yes.
And that presentation would also be a combination of FE, depending on what you're emoting.
Yep.
I think the other aspect is that what I found interesting is Robert Greene, C.S. Joseph typed him as an angelic INFP, which I found that very odd, considering that if you're SE polar or SE vulnerable, you would be writing about the acquisition of power.
Oh, I'm looking at it now. So I didn't know who Robert Greene was. Now I can see. Right. Okay.
He wrote the 48 Laws of Power.
Yes.
And then he did the I think it was like 49th law or whatever. Then.
Why would you even be aware of acquisition of power if you have that polar, right?
Yeah, that's not a vulnerable function thing.
That's a very odd typing. That's.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, that's probably the closest thing to a modern example of the original Niccolo Machiavelli. And Machiavelli, I think we typed as an ILI on the benchmark. We thought either IEI or ILI, eventually settled on an ILI. And I think it makes sense if someone's actually extrovert sensation suggestive to write a long book about how power works. And in a way that they see it with awe, they themselves were not the centre of power, but they could see it in others and they admired it and they wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, that would make
not
sense.
A vulnerable thing. Let's see what else there is here. Let's see. Ah, yes. Okay. Let's work down. So Kat has been typed by like 6 DCNH experts, and she's untypable, and they throw creative at her every single time. Well, goodness, that's not great, is it? I think, well, that's another thing. As I said, the admixture of type and subtype can make your typing worse, because you can start making all these exceptions towards types based on weird subtype-type combinations. You see the same problem when people try to combine Enneagram with type. With Socionics type, it leads to problems. It leads to problems with your typing methodology. You need to make sure there's no overlap between the two systems you're using to complement each other. Let's see what else there is here. Queen Blair is calling C.S. Joseph dumb. Oh dear. Well,
as fuck. That's what she. We want to add that in there.
Ah, yes. We'll add that in there, I guess. I don't want to get too abusive of C.S. Joseph. I'd rather debate him and discuss his views with him rather than call him rude names at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not interested. I would really like him to step up. I think the concept of what he's doing, I think, fine. You want to put forward a new system or a system that you claim is new. I think it should be subjected to logical scrutiny from others to stand the test. And I think the avoidance of that may indicate lack of confidence in his own system. So I think that's the angle to approach that versus character assault. But still, that's
yes.
comment that Queen Blair felt the need to share. So
Yes, and indeed, if he is, as he says, an ENTP, surely he would be eager to have the chance to engage in a debate on his own ideas. I certainly would.
Yeah. Let's see.
Let's see.
Maybe calling him rude names is the only way to get him to step forward. I don't think that's worked. He's been assaulted all over the internet for the last 6 months. I don't think that's going to be the best way.
No, we can't be the mob just throwing dung at his horse and carriages. No, that's not going to cause him to step out and engage with us. No, we need to be someone who he thinks could actually be elevating to actually talk to. But yes, certainly a beta approach. I think I was one of the early people to say that Queen Blair was a beta.
Sounds EIE.
Yeah, no, I think so.
Queen Blair?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Very FE thing to say.
Let's see. Implying there can be, LSI, I think Carl asked a question here, or at least made a statement. In my experience, LII can be rather prickly sometimes, especially when someone attacks their TI norms. Any thoughts on that with SE Polar as an aggression and SE Polar types?
Oh, yeah. No, I think extrovert sensation vulnerable types can be very prickly. They can be almost too sensitive. And they can lose their temper. Yep, it can happen. And it's completely ineffective. And they come across as a complete whinge bucket from doing it. But they do. I've seen EIIs lose their temper. I've known LIIs who lose their temper suddenly and get all upset. Because also they're unsure about how they're actually being perceived by others with their extroverted ethics being in the suggestive function. So yeah, prickliness, quite a bit. In terms of someone attacking their TI norms, their introvert logic norms, not certain. If anything, I'd say it's more about being in an overly intense environment or being subjected to moods which are less than positive, which can lead to that sort of reaction. I'm not sure if it's a TI thing.
I would naturally add, or at least try to think that being in the alpha quadrant, especially LII, would be open to any kind of assault with their argument as long as it's not overly aggressive and it's presented in a way that it's seen as a positive sharing or equal sharing of ideas. That would be my understanding of that. I think that as soon as it becomes aggressive, that yes, you might have a little pushback like that, especially if it's using an excess amount of force.
Yes. I think especially with an alpha, I think if they're being challenged in their introverted logic area, they'll come to defend it, but I don't want to get too prickly on it, because if anything, it's exploring other opinions and alternatives. So I think it's more in the sensory and ethical area when an LII is more likely to lose it. But yeah, maybe there is. I'm not sure. Let's see what else is there. Mark Shuttleworth or Frank Baum. Now I should know these are. Is Frank Baum, was he behind Star Trek? Let me just check. Frank Baum.
So.
No, the Wizard of Oz. Okay, that would be interesting.
These are such random characters and people.
It's a good one though. I just don't know enough about him yet.
Yeah, these are pretty random to me. Let's see. I don't even know who Mark Shuttleworth is. I'm gonna have to look this up.
Well, I do find with L. Frank Baum, his approach to writing fiction is very chaotic. There's very little consistency in the structure. He's not a consistent world builder like Tolkien was. So I think there's something there to be said. So I think certainly very likely to be a weak introverted logic type. Just if you look at Wizards of Oz, they've got different groups, different characters. It's not clearly set out what the map of Oz is. It's sort of put together later. Let's see.
I think this is a good question
Yeah?
from Zeno. How would you define the term valued in socionics? I assume it's close to how we commonly understand it, but want to understand it specific to this context.
Well, I'd say it's something which is appreciated, but I think it goes deeper than that. I think you can openly say you value something other than what you value in socionics. I think it's more about where your biases naturally lead you to. Like, with myself, I can often pay lip service to extroverted logic, but I know that deep down I do actually prefer things to be agreed. I do prefer things to be clear, rather than continuously disagreed, but with new factual data added. So, yeah, I think that it's perhaps deeper than a more conscious valuing, oh, I really like this thing. I think it's to what we end up finding ourselves reacting positively and negatively to.
I think there's something I'd like to add as well, is if you look at like particular information elements, someone who values, let's say not even values, someone who has strong logic is strong in both introverted and extroverted logic. And it's the same with ethics, right? So
Yeah.
Same with intuition and same with sensing. One side is valued and one side isn't. So these information elements are related to some extent. And naturally, if you're looking at, say, a coin, you're looking at one side or the other. And one side, that piece of information you are going to appreciate and respect more than the other side. And that's what I would say is a good way to look at it. I don't think that necessarily breaks it down, because I do believe if we were to take the world and break it down, it would be 8 different, essentially, atoms. And that's how we metabolize that information. But I think that's a good way to look at it in the sense that what side of the coin do you appreciate, considering that they're both share at least some of the same piece of information.
I also would say that how much you're valuing shows in behavior depends on what other function dichotomies are at play. So you will find, for instance, that a demonstrator function has far less of a negative visceral reaction from someone compared to an ignoring or vulnerable function, because they have far more of a ready access to it. You know, things like inert and contact, I think, play a major role here in magnifying the effect of valued or subdued.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It says that, somebody's saying, there was another one I saw here. My LII pre-calc teacher literally lost it from the entire class when she verbally singled out one student and said they're responsible for making her depressed after they reported her. I don't know if that was a conclusion to a thought, but I think it's the next one I was looking at. Ignoring is something said to be a private function. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think when it comes to ignoring function, I don't think it's something that is framed in terms of your public interactions with people around you, with society, with the external world. I think it's more about something which you engage with to make assessments in then using your ego functions. It's like a consultant you bring in when you need to, but you don't particularly like talking to that consultant, so you sort of quietly talk to this consultant and then send them back on their way because they're annoying. So yeah, I think private fits.
There's, I've noticed that EIIs can be a bit like, how dare you when you do something immoral.
Yep, I've seen that. And it's interesting that EII as opposed to ESIs, there's a difference there. ESIs almost expect to find people being or having malicious intentions, and they'll quickly act in the way that is needed to protect themselves and to place the person at a safe distance. They may decide to take action against the person, and it may be quite effective, especially if it's something related to getting their own back, righting a wrong which they perceive, etc. When it comes to an EII, there's more of a certain shock and disappointment that someone could have acted in that particular way, and they would have wanted to give them a chance, give
like
them
faith.
Yes, and they may feel disappointed when that's thrown back at them. They won't then know exactly how to act against them or protect themselves against them. So it may just be an expression of their disappointment, and it could very well be a how dare you, and then sort of maybe a storming off or a flouncing off with ineffectiveness involved. So yeah, EIIs can do that.
This one right here, I see value as unconscious tendency preferences, value functions as seen as somewhat useful, constructive, or convenient to focus on. Yes, valued. However, some valued are not unconscious, or they're not vital. Some of them are mental, and some of them are vital. But yes, I think the value functions, sure, calling them useful, constructive, or convenient is fairly accurate.
There's also the problem that those are very extroverted logic words. I think if you ask in the IEI why they appreciate introvert intuition, they'll probably snort at the idea of them seeing it as useful. That's not the reason why. If anything, calling something useful to them may make it seem mundane and trivial, and therefore unimportant. So yes, there's another trap actually, using the same words to ascribe value across different types. Different types will see different words themselves as being valuable, may even use the same words with very different appreciations behind those words. Magnus Carlsen. Do I know Magnus? I don't know any of these people. Goodness gracious.
That's what I'm saying. These are so random people. I don't
Is it random, or am I just ignorant? That's the question.
That's what I'm starting to think. I'm starting to think I'm extremely ignorant.
He's a Norwegian chess grandmaster. Yeah.
Couldn't tell you.
So what we've got to do, we've got to find that Goldilocks zone. We've got to find someone who we know, we have enough information about, but not someone who we've already known so well we've already typed them. And he's someone who we actually need to have a level of discussion around and come into some sort of conclusion. So we've got to run through enough potential suggestions until we find someone who is in that Goldilocks zone. Not someone we've already discussed, and not someone who haven't got a clue who they are and end up looking like completely ignorant people.
Weak valued functions we want to be better. Weak unvalued is a chore. Strong unvalued is obvious to us, so it's not worth our time. And I'm an LSE, so that makes sense.
Yep, I think Graph has done well there. I think Graph could even draw a graph with that information.
Yeah, okay. And Magnus, yeah, chess.
Ariana Grande. Very good. That is someone who I know who they are, only because of my fiancée talking about her, and because of the Manchester bombings, unfortunately.
I just don't care enough about these people's lives to really know them. That's my problem.
Oh, okay. Okay, anyway, I'll give it a go. So, I think Ariana Grande is most likely an extroverted ethics ego type. I don't get the impression of much extroverted sensation with her. She doesn't come across being particularly tough. I think there's a certain vulnerability in her approach. I don't know. If I were to guess, I think IEI, but let's look at some quotes just to see. What has she said? And let's make sure they're not just platitudes. Be happy with being you. Love your flaws, own your quirks, and know that you are just as perfect as anyone else, exactly as you are. I said I was looking for things which were platitudes. Let's try again. If anything, we should feel sorry for the people who want us to feel bad about ourselves, because they are the ones struggling for approval. In middle school, bullies tortured other kids because they thought it would make people like them more. Nothing burns more calories than dancing in 5-inch heels. Try it. I love nerdy, cute, quirky boys who don't take themselves too seriously. You know, maybe SEI could work. Meditation is a great way to keep my body well centered while juggling shooting schedules and recording sessions.
Bit of SI there.
Yeah.
Sounds like there's some SI, at least pushing it.
And as she said, she likes nerdy, cute, quirky boys who don't take themselves too seriously.
It's kind of FE.
Well, I think that sounds quite alpha NT to me. Well, appreciating someone who is alpha NT. Yeah, but there's not much depth here. Yeah, there isn't much. I'm not really seeing any sign of introverted intuition. Yeah, no, I think an alpha sensory ethical type could be SEI, maybe ESE, but I'm thinking perhaps more SEI at the moment. Not sure. What do other people think? Anyone on the live stream? What are any opinions here? Oh, Florian thinks ESE. Kat thinks she's an EIE. Queen Blair says, I remember she spat on donuts and said she hated America. Oh, goodness. Florian says, everything she says is extremely devoid of meaning. Well, yeah. She also said she didn't want her precious feet to touch the floor. Goodness. Well, there is certainly some controversy here over what her type might be. Maybe ESC. I'm very open. I'm leaning more alpha sensory ethical though. I can't see any sort of depth to her comments. It seems just very sort of nice, feel good comments to make. More about the day to day. I think an introvert intuition type may say as being overly trivial.
I think this is an interesting one. Jordan Peterson is someone I'm familiar with.
Yes. Now that's one who has also been a source of quite a bit of debate. I think LIE for him.
I think LIE for him too.
I know my friend Kamani wrote an argument of him being LIE. I've seen other people say EIE for him. What I would say to that is that extroverted logic seems to be underlying in his philosophy throughout.
Yes.
I'd say he is certainly an emotional person, a very neurotic person, who's had mental health issues and has trouble controlling his emotions even in public and starts crying. I don't think this is calculated at all. It seems very much just to take over him. I think he has a very deep sensitivity, which is not fitting the stereotype of an LIE, but doesn't contradict the type of an LIE. I would also say that there is a repeated criticism of introverted logic, especially when too firmly applied. So yeah, I think LIE probably makes the most sense there, and I think his worldview is quite gamma, and in areas it leans more towards delta in places, which makes EIE even less likely.
Sorry to cut you off there, but I actually have to get going. But I appreciate you having me on here, man.
Well, it's good to have you, Fuzzy.
Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
All right, peace out.
Peace out. So yeah, I think, Damon, what do you think about having like a guest on each time we do a live stream or I do a live stream?
What do I think about it? What do you mean?
Like just adding a little bit more flavour, just having an extra person just sitting in them and adding in comments. We can just, have people say, "Oh, I want to join this one," and we can pick one at random.
Just throw some people in here. I don't care who it is. We'll bring them in.
Okay, I think that'd be fun. I like that idea. Cool. What's it? Okay, Stars over there is saying, Jack, I'm curious what subtype of ILE you consider yourself to be. From what I know of ILEs, I think you seem no subtype to be. Yes, I think that. I think no subtype. Because I think that when I am presenting in public, I go all over the place with extrovert intuition. But as soon as I go on a Facebook group when there's text, I come across as some sort of very anally retentive, argumentative chap. So I could see why people may think I'm extrovert intuition subtype or introvert logic subtype if you use accepting producing. And people tend to think on the group I appear more as an ILED, a dominant ILE. So I would say I'm probably just no subtype, and I change in different situations. I think in general these subtypes don't have consistent meaning across contexts, and I think I'm just ILE. Just loving all the ILE. All of it. Yes. Let's see what else there is. Queen Blair would love to be a guest. Okay, Queen Blair. We will invite you on as a guest. But your hair is a mess. Well, you got to put your hair right. I know you like putting your hair right. Put your hair right, and you can come on and be a guest. See anything else? I know it's been an hour and a half, hasn't it? Damon, do you think we should finish it there?
Yeah, we could. It looks like we're out of questions here too, so it might be a good time to cut it.
Yes. Ibrahim says I'm an ESC subtype. I like that. Okay, guys, I just want to make a couple of announcements. So, first announcement, as you may know, there's this thing called a bell on YouTube. If you don't click that bell, if you just subscribe and don't click the bell, you won't get immediate notifications when I'm about to do a live stream. So click that bell. Very important. Second thing, I am trying to sort out meetups across the land. So, one meetup that is likely to be happening is in Austin, Texas, which Damon here is going to be organizing. So if you live anywhere near crawling distance of Austin, Texas, you reach out to Damon or message me, email me at worldsocionics@hotmail.com, and I'll be able to put you through to Damon and sort that out. We're also getting meetups sorted out in Dallas, Texas, and there's an extra big one being sorted out in New York. And of course, if you're in London, you can always come to my own meetup, which I run myself. So yes, if you would like to attend a meetup but don't live in these places, feel free to email me, and I'll try to connect you up to other people who might be interested. And yes, a third announcement. I want to debate people on things. So if you want to debate with me on something, please send me an email. Let's have a debate. It can be about the type of a celebrity. It can be about a particular topic. I don't care. I just want to debate things on YouTube. So please, email me if you want to have a debate. It'll be great.
I want to moderate.
And Damon wants to moderate.
Yeah, I want to moderate it.
Cool. Okay, guys. I think that's going to be it for me and Damon. Have a lovely rest of your evening, and take care.